Good afternoon, everyone. This is Miss Christine Cienfuego, and this afternoon, I will be discussing about the topic assigned to me entitled Principles and Philosophy of Philippine Education. For our learning objectives, state and discuss the principles of education, discuss the philosophies of Philippine education, draw the implications of the philosophies of education to teaching learning, explain how understanding of the philosophies of education will help improve the teaching learning situation. A crucial factor in good education is the curriculum. The attainment of the goals of education depends so much on the kind of curriculum which the school implements. In formulating a curriculum, certain principles of education should be considered. So, what are the 7 principles of Philippine education? Number 1, education should promote the Filipino culture and foster the sense of national pride. This is the first principle of education insofar as Philippine education is concerned. In what areas of the educational system has it been applied? The answer to this question is clearly seen in the adoption of Filipino as a major subject and medium of instruction in elementary and high school levels. The second principle, education should have a program based on an understanding and assessment of social forces and conditions of the present generation. The third one, education should bring the school closer to the people. The second and the third principles of education are concerned with relevancy. Varied changes have taken place in many aspects of life, like new scientific discoveries and new diseases, technical or technological innovations and inventions, global terrorism, destructive changes in the environment, demographic changes, and new political alliances on a global scale, and so on. The educational system should be responsive to these changes while it tries to keep those values and traditions deemed necessary for proper education. The fourth principle, education should have a program both practical and effective. This fourth principle of education is reflected in increased academic-industry linkages. Not only business and industry should have greater access to a pool of human resources. Greater autonomy should be given to colleges and universities, provided that these schools have programs that undeniably promote the Filipino culture and foster the sense of national pride. The fifth principle of education, educational programs should provide opportunities for all types of learners. And who are these learners? They are the above average and superior students, the average students, and exceptional students who possess certain physical or mental traits which differentiate them from the rest of the students. It is quite important for us as a people and as a nation to provide the above average and superior students and the gifted or the exceptional students with appropriate learning materials in an environment conducive for learning. So the fifth principle of education deals with educational opportunities for all the learners. So it is quite important for us to provide the physically and mentally handicapped students with appropriate learning materials in an environment conducive for learning. So certainly, there are public and private institutions that cater the needs of the blind, the deaf and mute, physically handicapped and retarded learners, and other exceptional students. However, it is quite likely that there is a shortage of school for handicapped students. And this problem is aggravated by the following. We have lack of professionals, lack of learning materials, lack of public facilities for the handicapped, insufficient funding, and lack of official support to make education truly meaningful and relevant for the handicapped. The sixth principle of education, education should focus on the child becoming the center of educational activities. And the last principle of education, education requires the formulation of objectives in terms of the pupil's growth and not in terms of the subject matter. Now, the sixth and the seventh principles of education are closely related. Basically, both principles emphasize the need to center all educational activities on the learner. The child or the learner is the most important client of the school. And the child's growth is orderly and follows scientifically proven patterns of development. And learning is affected by maturation, which is genetically determined pattern of growth and development and individual's readiness to learn. So the school exists and the educational system thrives because there are children who want to learn and who are in need of education. Now, let's proceed to the philosophy of the Philippine education. The Philippine education system has undergone various modifications brought by settlers who colonized our country. Its long years of exposure and contact with the Spaniards, Americans, and the Japanese have created a spectrum of educational variations and lines of emphasis. Remarkably, the Philippine education system, both former and current, is significantly influenced by Dr. John Dewey's philosophical perspective. So Dewey's influence on Philippine education started to get sharply visible when it became independent. Dewey emphasized the importance of students' voices in the educative process. The presence and engagement of students in learning are deemed essential. So students' body organizations or councils were established not only at an educational or institutional level, but as a national union. So presently, the K-12 basic education program substantiates a reform in the country's educational system. And this program reflects the Dewey's pragmatist and cognitive constructivist ideas. Inquiry-based learning and spiral approach are incorporated into the present curriculum. In a fast-pacing and ever-growing society, the educational system in the Philippines should be kept up to date. Now, students must not only be educated on a factual or conceptual level, But the instruction must also tackle the social, political, and economic aspects of the individual's life. In this way, education is more practical and functional. So students will be able to associate learning to the real world, thus taking in charge and being responsible for their learning. So the following are the posits under the Deweyan principle that are utilized in the present curriculum in the Philippines. The nature of the child is made the center of the educative process. I firmly believe with great affirmation that the main reason a school is established is because of the learner more than anything else. So Rousseau stresses that the child should be respective as he is with all his abilities and drawbacks, that in educating him, this should be given due consideration and all children cannot therefore be treated alike. The second one, the theory of self-activity is made the center or basis of learning. Hands-on activities and experiences cultivates learning. So it gives students first-hand experience and lifelong learning. Rousseau says, teach by doing. Whenever you can, and only for fallback upon words when doing is out of the question. Another one, activity program is the core of the curriculum. So knowledge acquired through direct experience is rather permanent. Field trip, report, group activity, games, observation, experiments, cultural events, on-the-job training, programs, and projects all contribute to lifelong learning. This is highly encouraged right now in schools, not as a supplement to the learning experience, but as the main methods of teaching. So according to Damian, to create a better nation, it should prepare the young people with the best education, even in the complexity of time, economic aspects, advanced technology, environment, social forms, and political change. Thank you for listening, and God bless everyone.